Also tonight, a father of three murdered, and loved ones say it was the boyfriend of one of his daughters who shot and killed him.
He moved you in his home, fed you, and probably gave you the type of love you needed, and you take his life? These words echoed across social media as a community tried to make sense of the unthinkable. On April 11, 2024, in broad daylight, 3 children watched as their father was gunned down in their front yard by the very person he had welcomed into their home. Welcome to Shadows of Crime. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community as we explore the darkest corners of human behavior. Today's case takes us to Pompano Beach, Florida, where a father's attempt to protect his family led to his death in the most devastating way possible. A confrontation that began over a social media video ended with multiple gunshots and a family torn apart. Keith Poole was known throughout his community for his generosity. The 44-year-old father of 3 had built a beautiful home with his own hands, a sanctuary with an island kitchen, home theater, and jacuzzi, a place where his gold-toothed smile welcomed everyone who entered. "If I got it, you got it," Keith would often say. It was this spirit of giving that led him to open his doors to his daughter's boyfriend, an 18-year-old named Lewan Jones. What Keith didn't know was that this act of kindness would cost him his life. The relationship between Jones and Keith's daughter seemed normal at first, but beneath the surface tensions were building. When Keith discovered inappropriate content his daughter and her boyfriend had posted online, a twerking video that crossed boundaries he wasn't comfortable with, he felt compelled to step in. "This man had the power to break boundaries," wrote Kevin Saran, a friend who mourned Keith on Facebook after his death. "He didn't care about your skin color, your status, your past, your background. He would treat you with respect and show you his generosity." But on April 11, 2024, that generosity would be repaid with violence. As we piece together the events of that fateful day, we'll examine how a social media post and a hidden weapon created a powder keg in the Poole household. We'll trace the final confrontation that left 3 children without a father and sent shockwaves through a tight-knit community. What drove an 18-year-old to pull the trigger multiple times? And why did he flee the scene with Keith's barefoot daughter in tow? The answers reveal a disturbing truth about boundaries, respect, and the devastating consequences when they collide. Born on June 10, 1968 in Columbus, Ohio, Keith Brian Poole grew up with strong family roots. The son of Mary Jordan and L.P. Poole, he was one of 4 siblings who spent their formative years in Columbus. After graduating from Brookhaven High School in 1986, Keith didn't waste time pursuing his ambitions. While most 18-year-olds were figuring out their next steps, Keith was already building his first business. He opened a salon and barbershop straight out of high school, showcasing an entrepreneurial drive that would define his life. His hands, skilled with clippers and scissors, would later build homes and create spaces where people felt welcome. Keith's career path wasn't linear. It was a testament to his versatility and work ethic. From his early days as a barber, he expanded into construction, where he learned to build not just businesses but physical structures. He worked as a caretaker and babysitter, roles that highlighted his nurturing nature. Eventually, he found stability driving for the Central Ohio Transit Authority, COTA, connecting people across the city he loved. But it was in Pompano Beach, Florida, where Keith truly created his legacy. There, on Northeast 28th Street in the Crest Haven neighborhood, he designed and built his dream home. This wasn't just any house. It was a reflection of everything Keith valued. The island kitchen spoke to his love of gathering and feeding others. The home theater showed his appreciation for entertainment and shared experiences. The jacuzzi, bar, and personal barber station were all carefully chosen amenities that allowed him to care for himself and others. "I have everything I need at home," Keith would often say, a statement that revealed his contentment and appreciation for the life he'd built. Music filled the Poole household, particularly R&B. Keith believed that the music one listens to shapes their spirit, and his favorite song, Sparkle by Cameo, captured his bright outlook on life. That outlook was visible in his infectious smile, accentuated by gold teeth that became part of his signature look. In his community, Keith was known by many titles: the King of Parties, a prophet to some, and most importantly, a devoted father. As a single parent raising his daughter, he demonstrated unwavering commitment to his children. All three of his kids were central to his existence, the motivation behind his hard work and generosity. Through his children's eyes, Keith wasn't just a provider. He was safety, stability, and unconditional love. When they looked at their father, they saw a man who had created a sanctuary where they could thrive. They witnessed how he treated everyone with respect, regardless of background, breaking down barriers that often divide communities. His daughter Jessie saw a father who worked tirelessly to give her opportunities he never had. His other children observed how he welcomed their friends, fed anyone who entered their home, and created an environment where laughter was abundant. This generosity would eventually extend to Lewan Jones, his daughter's boyfriend. When Keith learned Jones was essentially an orphan, he opened his carefully built home to the young man. It was a decision that aligned perfectly with everything Keith stood for: compassion, community, and care for others. It was also a decision that would lead to his death. Lewan Jones entered the Poole family's life quietly. At 18 years old, he was dating Keith's 17-year-old daughter, Jessie. According to family members who later spoke to investigators, Jones had been essentially orphaned, a young man without the family support system most teenagers rely on. When Keith learned of Jones' situation, he made a decision consistent with his character. He invited Jones to live in their home. For several months, Jones became part of the household fabric at 1585 NE 28th Street. He ate meals at Keith's custom island kitchen, enjoyed the home theater Keith had built, and became integrated into the family's daily routines. To outsiders, it appeared that Keith had once again extended his philosophy of "if I got it, you got it" to someone in need. Jessie's relationship with Jones seemed typical of teenage romance on the surface. They spent time together, shared interests, and like many Gen Z couples, documented their relationship on social media. As Jessie's father, Keith maintained a watchful eye while giving the young couple appropriate space to develop their bond. What wasn't immediately apparent was how the power dynamics were forming within this arrangement. Jones, despite being the beneficiary of Keith's generosity, was developing his own sense of territory within the home. For Jessie, having her boyfriend living under the same roof as her father created a complex intersection of family loyalty and romantic attachment. The first subtle warning signs emerged gradually. Jones began acting with increasing comfort in the home, perhaps misinterpreting Keith's generosity as permission to establish his own rules. Small disagreements about household expectations arose. Conversations that once flowed easily became tinged with tension. Then came the social media posts. Like many young couples, Jessie and Jones shared aspects of their relationship online, but some content crossed lines that Keith, as a father, couldn't ignore. The twerking video they posted represented more than just provocative dancing. It symbolized a direct challenge to the values and boundaries Keith had established for his home and family. For Keith, social media wasn't just entertainment, it was a reflection of character and values. The man who believed music shapes one's spirit likely viewed inappropriate online content as equally influential. When he saw his underage daughter participating in suggestive videos with her boyfriend, videos they had created under his roof, the foundation of trust began to crack. What makes teenage relationships particularly challenging for parents to navigate? Developmental psychologists point to several factors at play in situations like the one Keith faced. Adolescents are naturally pushing boundaries as they form their identities separate from their parents. When romantic relationships enter the picture, teens often feel torn between family loyalty and peer acceptance. Adding another layer of complexity was Jones's status as both guest and boyfriend. Having been welcomed into the home, he straddled the line between family member and visitor. This ambiguity may have created confusion about whose rules applied and when. Barbara Santiago, godmother to one of Keith's daughters, later told reporters, "Keith found out there was a weapon in the home. He didn't condone it, so he asked to please leave his home." This statement reveals that the twerking video wasn't the only boundary being tested. Somewhere along the line, Jones had brought a firearm into the sanctuary Keith had built for his family. The introduction of a weapon fundamentally changed the dynamic. No longer was this simply about teenage rebellion or inappropriate social media content. Now it was about safety, the core foundation of what Keith had worked to provide for his children. As tensions rose in the Poole household, the relationship between Keith and Jones deteriorated. What had begun as an act of kindness, welcoming a young man without a home into his family, was evolving into something increasingly volatile. Jessie found herself caught between her father's reasonable boundaries and her boyfriend's growing resentment of those limits. But something in the Poole household was about to change everything. A confrontation was brewing that would transform their lives in ways none of them could have imagined. The discovery of the weapon changed everything. Keith Poole had built his home as a sanctuary, a place where his children could feel safe and protected. The presence of a firearm, brought in without his knowledge or permission, represented a fundamental violation of that safety. Around the same time, Keith became aware of the twerking video that Jessie and Jones had posted on social media. The content featured his underage daughter in provocative dancing that crossed the boundaries of what Keith considered appropriate. As a parent trying to guide his children toward positive choices, seeing his daughter portrayed this way, with content created under his own roof, added another layer to his growing concerns. The combination of these two discoveries, the weapon and the inappropriate social media content, forced Keith into a difficult position. He needed to address these issues directly with Jones, establishing clear boundaries while maintaining his relationship with his daughter. The initial confrontation was reportedly tense but controlled. Keith approached Jones about both issues, explaining his expectations for behavior in his home. He emphasized that weapons were not welcome in a house with children and that the social media content needed to stop. These weren't unreasonable demands from a father concerned about his family's well-being. Jones' reaction to this confrontation would prove telling. Rather than acknowledging Keith's legitimate concerns, he became defensive. The young man who had benefited from Keith's generosity now resented the boundaries being set. What should have been a moment of accountability instead became the catalyst for escalating conflict. In the days that followed, tension filled the Poole household. Conversations became arguments. Silences grew heavier. The home that Keith had designed as a place of joy and community was transforming into a pressure cooker of unresolved conflict. If you're finding this story as troubling as I do, take a moment to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a situation where setting reasonable boundaries led to unexpected conflict? What would you have done in Keith's position? By April 11, 2024, the situation had reached a breaking point. Keith made the difficult decision that Jones needed to leave his home. This wasn't a hasty choice. It came after multiple attempts to establish reasonable expectations had failed. The presence of the weapon, in particular, represented a red line that Keith couldn't allow to be crossed. That morning, Keith informed Jones that he would need to find other living arrangements. According to witnesses, Jones didn't take the news well. What began as a conversation quickly escalated into an argument. Keith remained firm in his decision. His priority was protecting his family, including his 3 children who were present in the home. As the argument intensified, it spilled outside onto the front yard of the house Keith had built with such care. Neighbors later reported hearing raised voices as the 2 men continued their confrontation in full view of the street. No one could have predicted how quickly the situation would deteriorate. No one could have imagined that Keith's attempt to protect his family would lead to violence. No one could have foreseen that Jones's response to being asked to leave would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. What happened next would leave 3 children traumatized for life. The clock read 4:45 p.m. on April 11, 2024, when gunshots shattered the quiet of Northeast 28th Street in Pompano Beach. What had started as a confrontation over boundaries ended with Keith Poole lying on his front lawn, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds as his 3 children watched in horror. According to witnesses, Jones suddenly produced a firearm, possibly the same weapon Keith had discovered in his home. Without warning, he aimed at Keith and fired multiple times at close range. Keith collapsed to the ground, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. His 3 children watched in horror from just feet away as their father fell. The man who had built their home, who had provided stability and love, lay bleeding on the front lawn he had so carefully maintained. To be killed in front of your 3 kids? It is just tragic, Barbara Santiago told NBC6, her voice breaking as she recounted the horror of that moment. The Broward Sheriff's Office received a call reporting the shooting at 4:45 p.m. When deputies arrived at the 1500 block of Northeast 28th Street, they found Keith gravely wounded. Pompano Beach fire rescue personnel quickly transported him to Broward Health North at 201 E Sample Road in Deerfield Beach. Despite emergency medical efforts, Keith Brian Poole was pronounced dead at the hospital. The 44-year-old father of 3, entrepreneur and community fixture, was gone, killed in front of the children he had devoted his life to raising and protecting. I heard the shots, 3, maybe 4 of them, and then screaming. When I looked outside, I saw him on the ground and those poor children just standing there frozen. Neighbor who witnessed the aftermath. The kids were hysterical. How could they not be? They just watched their daddy get shot right in front of them. Witness who spoke to local news under condition of anonymity. One minute they were arguing, and the next they were gunshots. It happened so fast, but those children will remember it forever. Resident who called 911 after hearing the commotion. In the chaos that followed the shooting, Jones fled the scene, but he didn't go alone. In a shocking development, he took Keith's daughter Jessie with him as he ran from the house. According to Santiago, she left with a bra, shorts, no shoes, no phone. The circumstances of Jessie's departure remain somewhat unclear. Did she go willingly, or was she in shock? Was she afraid of Jones after witnessing what he had done, or was she still emotionally attached to him despite his actions? These questions would haunt investigators in the days that followed. What is clear is that in the span of mere minutes, 3 children lost their father, a community lost a beloved member, and a family was shattered beyond repair. The home Keith had built as a sanctuary was now the site of his murder, forever tainted by violence. As neighbors gathered and police secured the scene, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Keith Poole, the man with the gold-toothed smile who believed in sharing whatever he had, was gone, killed by someone he had welcomed into his home, and the shooter, along with Keith's daughter, had vanished. As Keith Poole was rushed to Broward Health North by emergency responders, Lewan Jones was already on the run. In a disturbing twist, he had taken Jessie Poole with him, Keith's 17-year-old daughter fleeing the scene of her father's murder in nothing but a bra, shorts, no shoes, no phone, as Barbara Santiago later described to reporters. The immediate aftermath at the Poole residence was chaos. Keith's other children remained at the scene, traumatized by what they had witnessed. Neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the sound of gunshots and screams. Broward Sheriff's Office deputies secured the area, marking off the yard where Keith had fallen with yellow crime scene tape. At the hospital, despite the efforts of medical staff, Keith was pronounced dead from multiple gunshot wounds. The man who had built a life centered around family and generosity was gone, leaving a community in shock and a family shattered. News of the shooting spread quickly through Pompano Beach's Cresthaven neighborhood. Those who knew Keith struggled to process what had happened. As night fell on April 11th, a manhunt was underway. The Broward Sheriff's Office issued an alert for Jones, now wanted for first-degree murder. Equally urgent was locating Jessie Poole, whose safety remained uncertain. Had she gone willingly with her father's killer? Was she in danger? These questions drove the intensity of the search. The investigation expanded beyond Pompano Beach. Lighthouse Point Police Department officers joined the effort, responding to 2201 NE34 St. Clair to assist BSO deputies during the search. Law enforcement combed through potential hiding places, interviewed associates, and monitored social media for any clues to Jones's whereabouts. On Wednesday, April 13, 2 days after the shooting, came the first breakthrough. Jessie Poole has been safely located and has been reunited with family, announced Kerry Codd, a BSO spokesman. While details of how and where she was found weren't immediately released, her safe return provided a small measure of relief amid the tragedy. Later that same day, Jones made a decision that surprised many. Rather than continuing to evade capture, the 18-year-old surrendered himself to authorities at the BSO West Park District Office. He was immediately taken into custody and transported to the Broward County Main Jail in Fort Lauderdale. For Keith's friends and family, Jones's surrender brought mixed emotions. While it meant the killer was no longer at large, it did nothing to fill the void left by Keith's death. One community member expressed this sentiment in a Facebook post directed at Jones. He moved you in his home, fed you, and probably gave you the type of love you needed, and you take his life? As news of the arrest spread, the focus began to shift from manhunt to mourning. The community that Keith had touched with his generosity now rallied around his children, especially the three who had witnessed their father's murder. The question on everyone's mind was no longer where Jones was hiding, but how these children would recover from such profound trauma. And for Jessie Poole, return to what remained of her family, a different kind of reckoning was just beginning. The Broward County justice system moved swiftly following Jones' surrender. Formally charged with first-degree murder with a firearm, the 18-year-old faced the most serious charge possible under Florida law. The severity reflected not just the taking of Keith's life, but the premeditated nature of the shooting and the fact that it occurred in front of Keith's children. On Thursday, April 14, Jones was scheduled for his first appearance in Broward County Bond Court. In a move that surprised court officials, he declined to appear before the judge, a decision that some interpreted as avoidance of facing the gravity of his actions. Despite his absence, the proceedings continued, and Jones was ordered held without bond at the Broward County Jail. The legal path ahead for Jones appeared straightforward but lengthy. First-degree murder cases in Florida typically involve extensive pre-trial procedures, including evidence discovery, witness depositions, and potential plea negotiations. If convicted, Jones, who would turn 19 in September, faced the possibility of life imprisonment. While the legal machinery began its slow grind toward justice, the community's response to Keith's murder was immediate and profound. The neighborhood where Keith had built his dream home became a gathering place for mourners. Flowers, candles, and personal mementos accumulated near the spot where he fell, creating an impromptu memorial to the man known for his gold-toothed smile and boundless generosity. Social media platforms filled with tributes to Keith and expressions of shock at the circumstances of his death. Other messages were directed at Jones himself, reflecting the community's struggle to comprehend how someone who had benefited from Keith's kindness could commit such a violent act. For those who knew Keith as a Charles W. Flanagan High School graduate who loved music, the loss was particularly personal. They remembered his passion for R&B, especially his favorite song Sparkle by Cameo. They recalled how he believed music shapes one's spirit, a philosophy that made the violence that ended his life all the more incomprehensible. The Broward Sheriff's Office, recognizing the community's need for closure, continued to gather evidence even after Jones's arrest. Detective Steve Novak led the investigation, asking anyone with information about the case to come forward. The department established a hotline, encouraging witnesses to call either directly or through Broward County Crime Stoppers if they wished to remain anonymous. As April progressed, the initial shock began to give way to deeper grief. Friends organized fundraisers to support Keith's children. Community leaders discussed ways to honor his memory and legacy. Local businesses where Keith had been a regular customer shared stories of his kindness and generosity. But the true impact of this tragedy extends far beyond one family. The ripple effects would touch on issues ranging from gun violence to youth intervention, from social media boundaries to the very nature of trust and hospitality. Keith Poole's murder wasn't a random act of violence. It emerged from a perfect storm of risk factors that, in retrospect, created a volatile situation. Understanding these factors is crucial not just for making sense of this tragedy, but for preventing similar incidents in the future. The introduction of a firearm into the Poole household fundamentally altered the power dynamics and potential consequences of any conflict. Research consistently shows that access to firearms in domestic settings significantly increases the likelihood of homicide. In Keith's case, his discovery of the weapon and subsequent request for Jones to leave triggered the fatal confrontation. The presence of the gun transformed what might have been a heated argument into a deadly encounter. Without that weapon, Jones might have expressed his anger differently, and Keith might still be alive today. This underscores the importance of keeping firearms out of homes where tensions exist, particularly when young people are involved. Age and emotional development played a critical role as well. At 18, Jones was legally an adult but still developing emotionally. The teenage brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for impulse control and decision-making, continues developing well into the mid-20s. This biological reality helps explain, though certainly doesn't excuse, how a young person might resort to violence when faced with rejection or perceived disrespect. The conflict over social media content represents another modern risk factor. For today's youth, online presence is deeply intertwined with identity and status. When Keith confronted Jones about the inappropriate twerking video featuring his daughter, he wasn't just criticizing content, he was challenging Jones' self-esteem and autonomy. This perceived threat to status, combined with the request to leave the home, created a pressure cooker situation. Several warning signs preceded the violence. The unauthorized presence of a weapon, escalating arguments, and inappropriate social media behavior all indicated growing tensions. Jones's resistance to Keith's reasonable boundaries suggested an inability to manage conflict constructively, a red flag that became apparent only in hindsight. Expert perspective. Dr. James Garbarino, psychologist, specialism in youth, violence. What we often see in cases like this is a young person with underdeveloped conflict resolution skills facing what they perceive as rejection. When you combine this with access to firearms and a sense of wounded pride, the risk for violence increases dramatically. Prevention requires a multifaceted approach, restricting access to weapons, teaching healthy relationship skills, and creating support systems for at-risk youth. Most importantly, we need to help young people understand that conflict doesn't have to lead to confrontation, and confrontation doesn't have to lead to violence. For parents setting boundaries with their children's partners, safety must always come first. This means having difficult conversations in public places when tensions are high, involving other adults when necessary, and being aware of warning signs like possessiveness, anger issues, or fascination with weapons. Could this tragedy have been prevented? The answer is a qualified yes. Universal background checks for all gun sales might have prevented Jones from obtaining a weapon. Red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders, ERPOs, could have provided a legal mechanism for removing the firearm once Keith discovered it. Community-based intervention programs might have identified Jones as at risk and provided support before violence occurred. School-based conflict resolution training could have equipped both Jones and Jesse with better tools for handling disagreements constructively. For families facing similar situations, experts recommend clear communication about boundaries, consistent enforcement of rules, and seeking professional help when tensions escalate. When weapons are involved, prioritizing safety may mean involving law enforcement before confrontation. Keith's attempt to set boundaries and protect his family was entirely appropriate. The tragedy lies not in his actions but in Joan's violent response, a response enabled by access to a deadly weapon and fueled by immature emotional regulation. As we examine the factors that led to Keith's death, one truth becomes clear. Preventing such tragedies requires addressing both individual behavior and the systems that enable violence. From gun safety laws to youth intervention programs, from social media literacy to conflict resolution training, each represents a potential point of prevention. The question now is whether society will learn from Keith Poole's death or continue to accept such tragedies as inevitable. Keith Brian Poole built more than just a house. He created a legacy of generosity, acceptance, and community that continues to resonate through Pompano Beach. His gold-toothed smile may be gone, but the impact of his 44 years remains visible in the lives he touched and the values he embodied. For Keith's 3 children, especially those who witnessed his murder, the path forward is unimaginably difficult. Trauma of this magnitude leaves deep scars, yet in the support surrounding them we see echoes of their father's spirit. The same generosity and care that Keith showed to others, now flowing back to his family when they need it most. Keith's story carries powerful messages about boundaries, respect, and safety. His attempt to protect his family by establishing clear limits wasn't just his right as a father, it was his responsibility. The tragedy lies not in his boundaries, but in how violently they were rejected. In a world where weapons can turn arguments fatal in seconds, Keith's death reminds us that gun safety isn't abstract, it's literally life or death. If this story has impacted you, please share your thoughts in the comments. How do we balance openness and boundaries? What conversations should we be having with young people about conflict resolution? Your perspective matters in this important discussion. Keith Poole lived by the philosophy, if I got it, you got it. He shared his home, his resources, and his heart freely with others. Though that generosity was betrayed in the most tragic way possible, it remains his true legacy, a reminder that even in a world where violence exists, kindness and community are worth fighting for. Keith's life mattered. His story matters, and the lessons of his death matter too much to forget.